Today, people think that the more expensive something is, the healthier it has to be. A salad costs $15 while a regular entree costs 11 or 12. Now, this wasn't the case back in medieval Europe. A peasant could dine on a nutritious meal for cheap, while nobility paid dear to make sure that sweet desserts were on their table. I'll be introducing medieval culinary practices, going over what kind of belief influenced their food intake, how resources were distributed among the classes, and how they cooked their food. Now keep in mind, when you look at food of the past and their habits, you're able to make better habits for yourself today. Medieval cookery went on the basis of no waste, which means that everything of the animal or the vegetable was used once and maybe twice and maybe third time, just to make sure that everything of it was used. And so when you go to a store and you look at the prices, think to yourself, how long will that last me? What can I use it for, and will it benefit me in the long run? Keep in mind that everyone has the ability to cook delicious food, and you don't need expensive ingredients or professional equipment to do so. They in the past did not have those things, and they made decent food. Now, the medieval ages lasted for about 1,000 years, and this is a long span of time. And so when I'm talking about medieval culinary practices, I'm going to be very general, since over the course of this long period, culinary practices will go in and out of fashion. And so when I'm talking, is very general and going to the staples that have lasted throughout the entire span of time. Now, without saying, all my information comes from these three books: The Art of Cookery by Terence Scully, The Book of Good Cookery by James Matter, and Medieval Taste by Massimo Montani. They all use primary resources and archaeological evidence to recreate the taste of the past. Now, this was a very religious time period, and so there's no surprise that back then they thought that food had magical properties that would be given to whoever consumed it. Doctors went on the basis of four humors, which was four existences of being that dwelled in the human body. These were hot, cold, wet, and dry. And so if a knight came in saying that he was suffering from a cold, the doctor would go to the cook and say that he is feeling cold and dry right now, and he needs something that's hot and wet. Therefore, food wasn't just seen as a thing to indulge yourself in, it was also a medicine. Although all foods were categorized under the four humors, it doesn't mean that they were seen as equal. Onions, for example, were seen as peasant food because they came from the ground and had a foul odor that supposedly the peasants shared. Game animals such as rabbits were exclusively for the rich to hunt and were outlawed for the lower classes to eat. Everyone ate fish, but only fish from freshwater sources. The ocean was considered to be a dwelling of disease, and so anything that came out of it would make you sick. Food at this point wasn't just a necessity, it was also a reflection of who you were in society. A banquet dinner showcased your prestige and your wealth. So what did the typical meal look like? Well, a peasant would always have a staple of rye or barley wheat bread. This was a very simple bread made from the flour, the water, and a bit of salt. And they would pair this with fresh or smoked fish. Now, before overfishing became a problem, farmers would love to have a piece of fish with vegetables from their garden. A well-to-do merchant or a vassal would get their hands on some cinnamon or black pepper. But everyone had herbs available to them to flavor their food. Going up to knights, they would have a staple of white bread. And this is where we start to see removes. Removes is a way of cooking, a way of eating where everything comes out at the same time. So you had your dessert, you had your entree, and your appetizer laying in front of you all at the same moment. And so a night will have a rabbit stew with bacon and beans in it, and then they would pair it with a sweet apple preserve, and then another vinegary green sauce made from basil, thyme, and mint with vinegar, and then they would mush it up with some salt and fat from the bacon. Going up higher, food becomes more enriched with spices. And so bread rolls were baked with sugar and butter. They would have exotic meats like peacock, very heavily seasoned, and then stuffed with grapes and leeks. Leeks being one of the few vegetables that was suitable for the noble class to eat. Members of the clergy would love almond milk because it was something that they could sip on while they were fasting. Wine and ale was drinking in place of water, since irrigation at the time wasn't the best, and even parents would rather their child drink a pint of ale than drink the water, get sick, and die from dysentery. So how did they cook their food? Well, the most common way to cook their food was a stove system. They would take a box of sand or dirt, make their fire, and then spread out the embers to make a very hot area, a medium heated area, and a low heated area. And this kind of works how our stoves work today. If they were traveling or knights were on campaign, they would use an open fire system where you would prop 2 sticks up with a third stick, your fire underneath, and then you would have an S hook or a chain that would level your pot just above the flames. Now, nobility had the option to have an oven. Now, this was very popular because not only did it heat up the entire estate, but it also cooked a bunch of food at the same time, which means you could host those big banquet dinners and show off your wealth and show off what you were able to give to your guest. Now, this is a very brief overview of medieval cookery, and so if you're interested in learning more, I would recommend checking out Historical Italian Cooking on YouTube. He goes over the information about where the things came from, he gives you the recipe, and he's just very understanding. And if you really want to learn from a medieval perspective on how to cook, he is the guy to go to. So next time you eat something, I would encourage you to go look up where that thing came from, because you might be surprised at what the answer is. I the other day searched up cheesy breadsticks, and my answer I thought was like 1980s, maybe Victorian era, but it actually came from the medieval times. When we understand food, we understand culture, and we understand history a lot more. So I encourage you to be intrigued by things, be interested on where your food came from. Thank you.